Oh, come on, it was obviously Colonel Mustard in the library with a wrench. Clue is an incredibly popular board game that first came out in 1943 and has continued to be in print ever since then. But I recently had someone ask me, what are games that I recommend nowadays if you like Clue? And I figured this is a perfect game for my series of 8 games if you like X. In this case, X being Clue. And so here are 8 board games for you if you like Clue. These are my 8 recommendations. There are so many more, and by all means, please let me and others know in the comments down below what you would recommend. I've heard a lot of people say Mystery Express. I've never played that one, so I don't know a lot about it, but it could well be a great choice. But here are my 8 games that I recommend if you like Clue, and I'll go into each one and the reasons why. But all of them will have some degree of deductive aspect going on, although in many different ways and sometimes with many different themes. See, the general idea here is if you want to solve for something, if you want to figure out, if you want to feel clever using logic, deduction, human interaction, any number of different things at your disposal to figure out what happened, these games all could be right for you. I'm going to go through them, timestamps down below, and let's start off with my first one, which is Coup. Coup is arguably the least Clue-like game over here. Despite the similarity of Coup and Clue as far as names go, it's the least similar as far as the game mechanics. You see, Coup is far more about bluffing than it is about deduction, although deduction will certainly play a part in this process. When you play Coup, you're going to take on the role of 2 characters. You will know those characters, the others will not. You can then take actions in the game, and many of your actions are decided by the character you own. So you can do something if you have that character. I can take 3 money from the middle because I am the Duke. And so I say on my turn, I will take 3 money from the middle because I'm the Duke. I will eventually use that money to hopefully kill off other characters and win the game. The problem is, I don't actually have to be the Duke to do that. I just have to say that I'm the Duke to do that, which allows you as the other players to start trying to figure out whether I'm telling the truth or not. Am I lying? Is the Duke one of my characters or not? Do you have the Duke? Well, there's 3 copies of each character, so just because you have the Duke doesn't mean I'm not the Duke, although if you have 2 Dukes, it certainly is less likely. It's also far less likely if Sarah just called that she's the Duke, and Bob just called that they're the Duke, and everyone for some reason is the Duke. Yes, by the way, that is exactly how a normal game of Coup does play out. But when you believe someone's lying, you have the opportunity to call their bluff. If you are correct, they will lose one of their characters, one of their lives. If they were telling the truth, then you will lose one of your characters, one of your lives. Rinse and repeat this process of utilizing the various characters, their abilities, calling out the right actions, until eventually one player is the only player left standing, either through correctly calling or not calling players' calls in the game, or alternatively by utilizing some of the actions in the game to take out and kill the other players, using either assassination or coup attempts to remove them from the game. If you want to figure out who other people are and possibly die along the way, in a game that lasts, 15-20 minutes per round, Coup is definitely one worth checking out. Now, Tiwanuku is possibly my favorite straight deduction game on this list, although thematically it is the furthest thing from Clue, which is why it's a little lower down on this list. But it is my personal favorite deduction game, so if you're interested in the deductive aspects of Clue, and you don't care about the theme attached to it, then this is definitely one worth checking out. You see, Tiwanuku has you logically figuring out what's going on the board, literally using logic and the occasional 50-50 judgment call to try to figure out what happened. It then combines that with some strategic elements that have forced you to examine where you're going to get the most points. So it's not just about figuring out what's going on the board, it's also about figuring out where are you most invested in figuring out what's going on the board, because that will turn into points for you. Ultimately, you're dealing with a bunch of crops. I said this is pretty far from Clue thematically, and I meant it. You see, you're going to be facing off against this board that is basically this giant bundle of crops. You are going to use Minesweeper-like rules as far as what can be next to different things in different ways to figure out what's actually happening. What are the crops on the board? What are the spaces? What are the various elements so that you can figure out, you can move your people around the board, and you can go ahead and deduce and then make offerings with these crops in order to gather points. And so it combines the strategic elements of figuring out a perfect puzzle, combined with the gameplay elements of figuring out where you're going to get the most points if you can solve those puzzles, and ultimately gives me my favorite deduction game that I personally have in my collection when I'm looking at it purely from mechanics first. My number 3 on this list is a game called Tragedy Looper. You see, in Tragedy Looper, you are trying to solve a crime, and you're trying to solve a crime in an incredibly clever way that no other game that I'm aware of has really done. You see, in Tragedy Looper, you have the players and you have the mastermind. The mastermind is trying to control the board state so that the players don't know how to stop the crime. And you see, you're trying to stop the crime. You see, in Tragedy Looper, the mastermind will eventually commit the crime that they need to commit, and then you can now go back in time to try to prevent that from happening, which involves you, because basically it's a loop. You are involved in a literal time loop. You have a certain number of chances to stop the thing from playing out, which means you need to figure out what is it that the mastermind is trying to do. Are they trying to arrange it that certain characters are in the same place at the same time? Do they have to be in certain locations with certain things going on? What are the specific constraints, the specific setup that the mastermind is trying to ensure happens? Because you will watch these events unfold in real time, go rewind the loop, and then try again, trying to see if you can figure out the patterns that led to that outcome. You are literally trying to stop a murder. I mean, it's not always murders, or maybe it is always murders, I can't recall. There's a variety of cases, but you're trying to stop the bad thing from happening, utilizing watching the thing play out, and then trying to figure out the tools and opportunities, as well as the mastermind's actions that they take, trying to predict around what they seem to be trying to do, what actually happened, and how do you stop that from happening again. Our number 4 pick is Chronicles of Crime. Chronicles of Crime has you playing the role of the detective. You see, in Chronicles of Crime, you're going to be literally engaging with various suspects, various witnesses, various everyone at various locations in this game. This is an app-driven game from Lucky Duck Games in which you're going to have an app, you're going to have a case, and then you're going to interview the various people. You go to a location, you scan the little QR code, you talk to that person, you learn a little bit more about what's going on. You then go to another location and you talk to Grandma, and Grandma says that the person at the first location was lying. That opens up a new chain of things you can do as you go back to the first location, talk to them with the knowledge that they were lying, but that wouldn't have actually opened up as an opportunity for you in the game had you not talked to Grandma. And so talking to Grandma is important. But also when you talk to people, you have the opportunity to ask them about specific things you've seen along the way. You can ask Grandma about the case files you already found. You can ask Grandma about the murder weapon. You're going to scan the characters and the various items, trying to figure out where do you want to spend your time, with time being the limited resource as you try to solve for the case. If you want to feel like a detective, Chronicles of Crime, more so than any of these other games, has you playing out that almost role play of you are the detective, figure out what happened, talk to the characters, interview, utilize time as your most valuable resource, and try to win the case. Our number 5 pick leans a bit more into, well, the human element like we had with Coup. This is One Night Ultimate Werewolf, which is one of my favorite, if not my favorite, hidden role game. You see, in One Night Ultimate Werewolf, you have one night to figure out what happened, and that's one night to talk to the players, to lie a little bit yourself, to figure out who is lying to you, and to try to piece together a perfect story of what actually happened so that you can win. You see, there are no teams in this game, even though there is the appearance of teams, because the appearance of teams is you have the villagers, you have the werewolves, sometimes you have other characters who have their own goals, and you're trying to figure out, well, how do I survive? Werewolves don't want to be caught. Villagers want to catch the werewolves. That means that if I'm on the same team as a villager, we're on the same team, right? Except we're not, because we may start the game off on the same team, but throughout the night things will happen. People are going to swap roles, people are going to steal roles, people are going to move things around and swap in different ways. That means that whatever started off a certain way is not where the game ends. I may have started off as a werewolf, and me together with Hannah, we want to make sure that the villagers don't catch us. But by the time I wake up, I don't know what I am, and I have to talk to all the players, Hannah included, to figure out if I can deduce what's actually going on. What remained static throughout the night? What changed? What is my current role? What is my current objective? Which means Hannah and I are no longer aligned until I can figure out at the very end of it, where do I actually end up? Hannah can turn around and betray me in a second, because if she started off as a werewolf, but she now believes that she's the villager, if she believes those roles were swapped, she is now incentivized to point a finger at me. And so by validating Hannah to the other players, by acting as teammates, I may simultaneously point her finger at my own destruction, leading to my loss. There are no teams in One Night Ultimate Werewolf. There are accidental situations in which people win together at the same time, whether or not they intended to do so. You're on your own, and by the time the game goes on, you will know it. My number 6 pick is The Key. The Key, specifically over here we have The Key Escape from Strongwall Prison, is a series of games from Haba that has players, again, utilizing logic to piece together disparate elements to put together the puzzle of what happened. In The Key, you'll be given a bunch of different cases to go through, and then you'll be given a bunch of cards and elements that all lead to these clues as far as what is it that happened, who was at what location, what clues did you find behind, what traces were left in different areas. You have this giant puzzle of cards in the center of the table, and that giant puzzle of cards is going to give the players the opportunity to riffle through them, trying to find and put together pieces of, well, logical clues. This person was at that location before the other people. The person who was shortest was there before they were. This person did this at an earlier time in the night than the person who was then at the prison guard at different points and places. You have all these different pieces of information that you are trying to gather in order so that you can figure out what it is that happened. If you've ever appreciated those logical puzzles of, James and his brother are not the people who like chocolate ice cream. The people who like chocolate ice cream are not the people that live at Windmill Cove. The people who live at Windmill Cove are related to James and married to Alfred's brother. If you like those kinds of puzzles where you keep being given different pieces of information and slowly but surely you are able to piece together a coherent narrative with a single answer that solves for everything, then you'll love the series of The Key. It has you trying to piece together what happened as you played. And then finally, there's Deception and Murder in Hong Kong. Arguably the game that first comes to mind when I think of a game that I want to recommend to someone who's looking for a clue alternative. Deception and Murder in Hong Kong has you trying to figure out, well, what went on with what murder weapon in what way. There's going to be players trying to communicate to the other players as far as who the actual murderer is in the game. You have this player who knows what's going on, who's trying to direct information toward the other players. You have the players who's trying to obfuscate what actually happened. And you have these kind of roles, these elements that give you a thematic undertone to the game, but all ultimately conclude with a game that has you trying to piece together who did it, often with what weapon, and trying to utilize all the clues and hidden communication, the limited communication in the game to figure out what happened. Both thematically, not necessarily mechanically, but thematically and as far as the general mechanical overtones, Deception and Murder in Hong Kong is a game you should absolutely be checking out if you're looking for a game that will scratch that the elements of what Clue gives you, but with a more modern game design. And these are my 8 recommendations for games to check out if you like Clue. If you've enjoyed everything that Clue has done for you, if you like that table presence, if you like pointing figures, if you like solving mysteries, these are all games that will give you elements of that in wildly different ways with sometimes wildly different themes. But again, let me know in the comments down below what you recommend as far as a game for others that you should check out if you like Clue. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this video helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.